What's up, Speedy's Garage gang? Today at Speedy's Garage, we're going to be putting a little bit more power into GoManGo, so stick around, you're going to see how we're going to do it. So here's what we picked up. I've been teasing in some of the other videos about getting some secret boxes delivered to the shop. I'm going to show you how we're going to make a bit more power. Those of you that have followed along online have probably gotten the clues. Got a supercharger belt. There we go. So there we go. It's a Litens Hellraiser pulley. It's a 2.72 size. This was the first one that came out. They may have now come out with a different size, a 2.8 something, but this should make about 16 pounds of boost on the car, which I think is going to be the sweet spot. And what is really nice about these pulleys is they're designed and manufactured by the original pulley manufacturer that makes the supercharger for the Hellcat. And that means that it's a decoupler pulley. So when you're on the gas and you're getting on it and you shut the throttle, some of the fixed pulleys that replace the factory pulley, they bolt into place, and when you let the throttle off and all that inertia has to slow down from the supercharger spinning, the belt can chirp and it puts some stress on the crank pulley and on the supercharger snout, the supercharger internals, as all that inertia tries to slow down. Well, this one acts just like the factory pulley. It allows some back spinning, so when you let off the throttle, it actually back spins and takes some of that pressure off the crank. That's exactly what I was kind of waiting for. I was going to do the other one if it didn't come out, but I'm glad this was developed and designed and released. So we went with this one. It's going to make the car a lot faster. And we're going to be using Mike at ostdyno.com for our tuning. He tuned Orange Crush, the RT that we had previously, and did a phenomenal job. This tune for GoManGo will be done via email. We're going to start with that. There was some rumor going around a while back that a 285 pulley was the smallest you could run on pump gas on a Hellcat. I called Mike. If you missed that, I'm going to link it to the top. Be sure to go back and listen to that discussion that he and I had. I actually did a video on it, and he and I talked through it. He had tuned several of these cars on a 272 pulley at the time I talked to him, and had not had any issues on pump gas. As a matter of fact, some of them actually raced on pump gas, and they were running like 10.0 with this pulley on the car. Several of his customers went with a 285 fixed upper, the one that's not decoupler, and they did a 10% overdrive lower as well, which makes actually more boost than the 2.72 alone, and they were also running fine on pump gas without any issues. So I don't have any concerns there. And the final thing, the Demon and the Redeye make 14.5 pounds of boost from the factory. And this is probably gonna make 16, I would say, on my car. So another 1.5 pounds, I'm not that concerned about it on pump gas when the fuel around here will be 93 octane that I'm gonna run, and the Demon and the Redeye were tuned from the factory to run on 91. So let's get started and make this thing fast. And real quick, here's what you get in the kit. You get the pulley, obviously. You get an installation tool. It's a small hex head that fits in the end of the pulley, allows you to tighten it. It comes with 2 factory style caps. Snap on the end of the pulley after installation. Glad they send an extra one, a spare, that's nice. You get the belt, obviously. And it came with some paperwork. I have no idea why they included that with this pulley. It says GM instructions and has nothing to do with this pulley. So I don't know if that was just a mistake in my kit or what. We don't need them anyway. Who follows instructions? Let's go get this thing put on. I've started laying out the tools I'm going to need to get this job done. I am going to be using my electric impact driver, as well as a small 3/8 low power impact. You're going to need a couple of special tools. You're going to need a torque wrench that can go down to like 4 foot-pounds for reinstalling some of the supercharger components. You are going to need a Torx T30 bit for some of the supercharger bolts. You are going to need a I'm using a 24mm socket, and I borrowed this from a buddy of mine. This is part of the Metco installation kit, and that's the adapter that goes to the stock pulley to remove it, and it takes a 24-inch socket, so you will need something like that. You're gonna need a smaller 15mm socket, one of the regular non-impact type, that will fit through the Metco tool that holds the pins on the back of the pulley. That way you can put through and hold the retaining nut still while you remove the factory pulley and install the new one. So you're gonna need the Metco tool. Again, I borrowed this from a buddy of mine, but you can buy these online if you need one. And you're gonna need a couple of larger torque wrench to get up into the torque range, and some panel removal tools. So that's where I've started getting the tools out to get ready for this job. As I find new things that I might need, I'll mention them and call them out. You're gonna need a couple of other sockets, so you need a good socket set, a couple of extensions and things of that nature. So now we can get going. And as always, when I'm working on a vehicle, I wanna do the work being as least intrusive as possible to the car. I don't want to take half the car apart just to swap the supercharger pulley. So the plan is going to be to work on the cowl area a little bit to give us some room. The bolts in the back of the supercharger, there's a little bit of a clearance issue there, so we're going to try to get to where we can get to those easily without taking half the car apart. And then we're going to try to just prop the supercharger up. I'm not going to completely remove the supercharger. A buddy of mine did it this way and told me it works out great. So we're just going to prop the supercharger up and support it with something. There's one bolt on the bottom of the supercharger snout that's a little bit tricky to get to, and propping it up like that allows you to get to that bolt and take the supercharger snout off the car and go do your work on it on the workbench. So we're going to start by working with the cowling, and you're going to use your trim removal tool and just come in here and work your way underneath it. It should be pretty easy to pop off just like that. And there's about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those that go all the way across. So we're going to start there, and then we're going to remove this brace, which is 4 13mm bolts. Okay, on the right-hand side, passenger side, there is the computer, and it's on a bracket attached to the brace. So one of the 13mm bolts will come out of there. I did go ahead and remove the plastic cover, obviously, and it's just some of those push pins. And I went ahead and remove the doors out of the cowling just to get them out of the way, make things a little bit more flexible. I have gone ahead and removed the engine coil pack covers, I guess is what they're called. Remove those on each side as well. And the PCV line, or catch can if you have one, went ahead and got that out of the way too. So that's where we're at. We're about 10 minutes in. All right, now we're just going to remove the brace. Had to wiggle a little bit to get it out from underneath the windshield wiper. And there is a electrical tab on the driver's side. We have to push out. And I wrapped up the other end with a towel to make sure I didn't scratch my paint. Now it should, lift right out. I did put a microfiber towel around the bracket for the computer to make sure that didn't scratch up anything. And the reason we removed that cross brace is to give us access to these bolts. I think with the flexibility of the cowl and the clearance that we got by removing that brace, we should be good to go there. Now I'm going to go around and remove all the electrical connectors, and most of them are push lock. So you push back and unlock it. Got one there, got one on the intake, some up here. We got this PCV hose that already loosened that. I went ahead and took this out of the little bracket. That'll pop off. We got some more down here. You get the idea. So yes, there's one here, one here. I am not disconnecting the fuel line. I don't think we're gonna need to do that. And I don't think we're gonna have to disconnect the injectors. I think there's gonna be enough slack in the wiring harnesses for those that we can lean this up enough to get to that bolt without undoing those. There is a connection on the back of the bypass valve, but I'm gonna worry about that one in a minute. And now we're gonna go after the air box. And it's held in place with some clamps that are 8mm. I'm just gonna use my drill driver for that. Nice and easy and fast, as well as these. And this drill driver is magnetic. I recommend you use one that is magnetic so you don't lose any of the bolts. Next, I disconnected the electrical connection for the throttle body, and it's one of those push locks. Now we're going to take the belts loose. I'm not going to take the engine belt all the way off, I don't think. Let's see if I can get this done by just loosening it. So push towards the center of the engine, and that belt will loosen. I'm doing that with a 3/8 breaker bar. It locks into the tensioner. It's a little bit tricky to get it out. And with that belt out of the way, I'm going to see if we can loosen the supercharger belt. And this tensioner is a 15mm. Push towards the center there, and you don't have a lot of room, so you're going to have to take it off the idler. That should give us what we need. And now we just have to fish the supercharger belt out of the engine bay. And no, it was not that easy. I just made it look like it was through video editing. Okay, Mrs. Speedy just came out and said that it is dinner time, so we're gonna call it quits at this point. We're about 45 minutes in, so making pretty quick work of it. We're to the point where we're ready to take the supercharger lid bolts out so we can get that supercharger elevated and get the front snout off. I'm just gonna work on this a little bit each night after work, so we're gonna call it quits for tonight, and we'll be back. So what's up, everybody? We are back at it. I did stop by and see my friends at Freeland Dodge on the way home from work tonight, and I picked up some of these Tech Connect documents on the supercharger so that I would know the torque specs and the pattern that the bolts need to be torqued in. And looking at the supercharger lid information on the uninstall or the removal, there's actually a torque, not a torque pattern, but a removal pattern they want you to follow on those bolts. So there you go. So we're going to do that and get that supercharger lid removed. And in doing one final check, I found a vacuum line, I guess, that's connected underneath the throttle body. So you'll need to take that off, and it was on there pretty good, so don't be afraid to pull on it. And then we also have the bypass valve electrical connection. It's another one of those push locks. So we need to get that out of the way as well. Get that disconnected. And it does have one of those plastic Christmas trees connecting it to the bypass valve, so you want to be sure and disconnect that as well so that it is not connected to the top of the supercharger. And just so I did not forget, I went ahead and installed the shorter belt that came with the pulley kit for the supercharger. It's not hard, it's a little bit tedious, so you'll have to it's hard to get your hand around the fan shroud down there, so that's really the hardest part. And like I said, just a little bit tedious. You need to follow the belt diagrams, and I'll show those there for both the supercharger belt as well as the accessory drive belt. And I started on the driver's side and worked my way around and went ahead and hooked it on to the tensioner and then did the alternator last. The supercharger belt does have to go on first, and I just kind of got it setting off to the side until we come back to put it over top of the new pulley. Okay, so now it's time for the supercharger lid bolts. We're going to start with the cylinder head retaining bolts, which are these. And they, like I said, they have you do them in a certain pattern. So this is 10, 9, 8, 7. I'm kind of glad the back ones are some of the first ones to do because they're going to be a little bit more tricky around that cowl. But we're just using a little small impact driver and a 10 millimeter. All right, ran into a little bit of an issue. I thought this would bend back far enough to get this bolt out. That bolt is super long. So we're going to have to probably take that windshield wiper out. And I already popped off the little cover. Just slide your fingernail in there. That'll pop off easy. And it's a 15 millimeter bolt to take out that windshield wiper. And you can just lift it out of the way. And now that should give us plenty of room. Yeah, get that bolt out. There we go. Now we can just run through the rest of them. They should be easy. So now the supercharger really should be ready to lift up, and I'm going to go ahead and remove the lid because that's the next thing that's going to have to go out of the way to get the blower snout off. We'll start with these 5 longer retaining screws. And next we're going to get these 16 shorter retaining screws out. I'm just going to go around the perimeter. Being careful not to drop them, obviously. All right, we got those retaining screws out, and there's a little tab on the left-hand side of the supercharger, driver's side, that you can use and kind of pry up on it. Let's see. And really the thing holding it is the bypass valve gasket, so we just got to kind of pop that loose, and then we should be able to just lift it out of here. Success. There you go. That's what the underside looks like. Okay, and there are 6 intercooler retaining gaskets. They're supposed to stay with the lid. So mine kind of, on the passenger side, kind of stuck. So we're going to carefully remove those, put them back in the lid. So we're just going to gently push those back into place. And here's what we're looking at with the lid removed. And the TechNet or Tech Connect or whatever it's called article says that you're supposed to take this gasket out, the supercharger lid gasket, and use a new one. Unfortunately, you can't buy some of these gaskets. It said the same thing about the supercharger nose gasket, that you're supposed to use a new one, as well as the bolts, which I thought was kind of weird because they're only torqued to like 26 foot-pounds. However, you can't just buy this gasket or this gasket independently. You have to buy an entire supercharger gasket kit. It's about $150. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to reuse these. The car doesn't have very many miles on it, so they're probably assuming in that TechNet article that by the time you get to the point where you're actually messing with the supercharger, that it's got quite a few miles on it and some age, and it's a good idea to do these seals while you're in there. This car only has about 6,000 miles on it, so no big deal. So we're gonna just go back with those gaskets that are already there. And there are the rotors. You can see those, they look good, no issues. We're gonna put something in there to kind of prevent anything falling into them while we're working. There's our bypass valve, and here's the entire reason we have to take all this apart. It's these 6 bolts, and there's one underneath in the middle that we can't get to until we rock the supercharger back. And these are your intercoolers. So the air gets compressed up this direction from the rotors, flows over the top of the supercharger lid and down headed towards the cylinders. There is coolant flowing through these. There's one on each side. And the coolant pulls heat out of the air, takes it up front to, air's blowing across the front of the car to cool the air down that's being pressed into the engine. And that gives you a more dense charge and more power. And if you want to see what the rotors look like in motion, I can turn the supercharger pulley so you can see I'm turning it here. And you can see the rotors, how they mesh together. And when they're spinning really fast, they grab air and compress it. So that's how it works. And here is our electronic bypass valve. So on a positive displacement supercharger, which the one on the Hellcat is, it's pretty much making boost all the time. When those rotors are turning that I showed you earlier, when the engine's running, those rotors are turning, I guess I should say. And so you're making some pressure into the engine. And when this valve is open, it lets all that escape. When this valve closes, now you're making boost. It shuts off and all the boost goes into the engine. So that's how that works. And when it's open, it bleeds that boost out to the atmosphere. And looking around, I see a little O-ring here. I don't see any on the other two. Let's go take a look at the engine. Yep, so there are little O-rings that are in the supercharger, and I would rather them all be together. So I am going to put this one back where it's supposed to go. There we go. So when you're doing this work, take a look for things like that. You want to kind of pay attention because that could cause you an issue down the road if you miss it. Okay, I put a towel back here to protect the rotors and make sure nothing falls into the supercharger. And now we're just going to remove these 3 T30 Torx bits that hold the bypass supercharger grommet in place. And that's to give us access to that one bolt. So we'll get after those. It's kind of stuck on there, so I'm going to use a little plastic pry tool to kind of help me here. Well, there's a little gasket there, so be very careful at this point with the gasket. You don't want to tear anything. For some reason, this car seems to have had a lot of the gaskets are stuck to the aluminum pieces. So that gasket's supposed to be in that channel, so we're just going to put it back in there. There we go. All right, so we're at the point now we're ready to actually lift the supercharger up to get to the nose bolts. Went ahead and cut some pieces of wood. That's what I'm going to use to prop the supercharger up. I put some tape around them just to prevent any debris. Our crew chief Greg is on his way over. He's going to help us with this part. It's a little bit heavy to get that up, and Miss Speedy wasn't coming out here in the garage to help me. I could probably figure out a way to do it with a pry bar or something like that, but Greg wanted to come over and hang out for a little while anyway. So he's on his way now, so we're going to go say hey to him. So I think that's a pretty good stopping point for this week. Be sure to tune in next week where you'll see our crew chief Greg and I finish up that Hellraiser 2.72 pulley install on Project GoManGo here. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. That helps us get them out into the YouTube algorithm and into the stream, and more people can see them and get more subscribers, and it helps the channel grow. Thanks to everyone who does that. Be sure to check us out on Instagram. It's @Speedys_garage, as well as our website, www.speedysgarage.net. And if you haven't subscribed already, be sure you do. You don't want to miss next week where we show you how to install that pulley the right way and the easy way. I'll be seeing you out there.